Passages. Unit 3, Lesson 8. Defining and non-defining relative clauses. Objectives. Recall 3 to 4 relative pronouns, their functions and uses. Identify a relative clause in a sentence. Distinguish the difference between defining and non-defining relative clauses. Relative clauses overview. What is a relative pronoun? A relative pronoun is a word that introduces a relative clause. It functions as a pronoun and it can be the object or the subject. How many relative pronouns can you name? Whose, that, who, whom, when, which, why, and where. Use whose for possession, who for people, whom for people as an object, and it is more formal than who. When for time, which for things, why for reason, that for things and people, and where for place or location. How can I identify a relative clause? Remember, the relative clause is introduced by a relative pronoun. Look at this paragraph about Beijing. How many sentences does it have? It has 2 sentences. Let's focus our attention on the first sentence. Can you identify the relative clause in this sentence? Remember, the relative clause starts with a relative pronoun. Yes, the relative clause is, which include the summer palace and the forbidden city. What is the relative pronoun in this relative clause? The relative clause has this relative pronoun, which. Which is the relative pronoun? Remember, the relative pronouns are that, which, who, whom, where, when, why, and whose. The relative clause is part of a sentence and it starts with a relative pronoun. Defining and non-defining relative clauses. Defining relative clauses. A defining relative clause defines or gives essential information about a noun. For example, the Myeongdong area has dozens of shops that sell the latest fashions. That sell the latest fashions is the relative clause in this sentence, and it is classified as a defining relative clause because it gives essential information to identify the shops in Myeongdong. The defining relative clause does not have commas before the relative pronoun. You can use the relative pronoun that with the defining relative clauses. Non-defining relative clauses. A non-defining relative clause gives extra information about a noun. For example, most restaurants here stay open until midnight when many locals are still enjoying dinner. When many locals are still enjoying dinner is a relative clause in this sentence, and it is classified as a non-defining relative clause. It can be removed from the sentence because it is not necessary. The non-defining relative clause use the comma at the beginning or at the beginning and the end of the relative clause, and you cannot use the relative pronoun that. It is time to practice. Let's talk about Sydney. The spring and the fall are the seasons when most people come to visit. The relative clause is when most people come to visit. Is it a defining relative clause or a non-defining relative clause? What do you think? A non-defining relative clause. Why? Because it gives essential information about a noun and it doesn't have a comma. Thanks for watching this video. Subscribe to my channel and click on the bell.